Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into one of the absolute most fascinating periods in world history, the era of the global tapestry, spanning from 1200 to 1450, and specifically, we're going to be focusing on Dar al-Islam. I want you to imagine a vast, culturally diverse arc of civilizations. We're talking about a world stretching all the way from the Iberian Peninsula in Western Europe right to the frontiers of India in the East. It's just a truly massive geographic footprint.
Okay, let's dive right into this, because looking at that map brings us to one of the greatest historical paradoxes. Seriously, think about it. How do you unite a world of that incredible size without a single, overarching ruler? How does a civilization maintain such strong coherence and unity, despite some pretty severe political fragmentation? Well, that is exactly the mystery we're going to unravel today.
Here's our roadmap to figure this out. 1. The abode of Islam. 2. The house of wisdom. 3. The cultural glue. And 4. The Delhi Sultanate.
All right, part 1, the abode of Islam.
So, you'll often hear the term Dar al-Islam, which literally translates to the abode of Islam. But here's the thing. This wasn't a unified nation with a neat single border. It was essentially the territories where Islamic law governed. By the year 1200, it was really this connected web of scholars, merchants, and rulers who shared a religious framework and a sacred language, Arabic. It helps to think of Dar al-Islam as an aspiration of a shared culture, rather than a single, rigid political empire.
To really understand why it wasn't just one big empire, we've got to look at the caliphate. This was the traditional political and religious institution of Islamic governance, and it was headed by a caliph who claimed succession from the Prophet Muhammad. Now, for centuries, the Abbasid caliphate was the absolute center of this world. But, and here is the crucial point for our timeline today, by 1200 CE, the Abbasid caliph had actually been in decline for centuries. He retained symbolic religious authority, sure, but actual boots-on-the-ground military power, that had completely shifted elsewhere.
And tracing this timeline brilliantly illustrates exactly what I mean by that decline. The Abbasid Caliphate kicks off in 750 CE, governing a wildly powerful and wealthy Baghdad. But fast forward to 945 CE, and Shia Buyid dynasties essentially place the caliph under house arrest. Then, in 1055 CE, a Sunni Turkic confederation from Central Asia, the Seljuk Turks, sweeps into Baghdad, displaces the Buyids, and just starts governing in the caliph's name as sultans. Real power had violently fractured and shifted to these regional Turkic sultans, which eventually culminated in the total end of the Abbasid Caliphate in 1258.
Which brings us to part 2, the house of wisdom. Now, back when they were at their peak, under the Abbasid caliphs, Baghdad became one of the largest and wealthiest cities in the entire world. And its crowning achievement? That would be the Beit al-Hikmah, or the House of Wisdom. Picture the ultimate cosmopolitan brain trust of the ancient world. It was a massive translation and research institution bringing together Arab, Persian, Greek, Indian, and Jewish scholars to work side by side in the exact same libraries. Religion or ethnic origin didn't really matter here. This was pure, state-sponsored patronage of knowledge.
This intense collaboration built into a translation movement that, quite literally, changed the world. And it unfolded in 3 massive steps. First up, these scholars gathered ancient texts from Greek heavyweights like Aristotle, Plato, and Euclid, alongside crucial Indian texts. Second, and this is huge, they didn't just translate them into Arabic, they actually expanded on them. They added totally original contributions in algebra, algorithms, astronomy, optics, medicine, you name it. Finally, step 3. These Arabic language works eventually made their way over to Western Europe in the 12th and 13th centuries via Islamic Spain and Sicily. This transmission is exactly what triggered the scholastic revolution in European universities. So, the big takeaway here is that much of what modern science and medicine inherited from antiquity actually passed directly through Arabic language scholarship during this exact period. Crazy, right?
Moving on to part 3, the cultural glue.
So, let's go back to our paradox. If the politics are totally fractured and the caliph has basically zero real power, how did Dar al-Islam not just survive, but actually thrive? Well, the foundational layer of this cultural glue was Sharia. This is Islamic religious law derived from the Quran and the traditions of the Prophet. But Sharia wasn't just about how to pray. It governed family law, commercial transactions, and criminal penalties. And because it was interpreted by religious scholars rather than politically appointed kings, it provided this highly portable framework. Think about it. A merchant traveling all the way from Spain to India could rely on the exact same basic framework of law and ethics wherever they went, totally regardless of which local sultan happened to be in charge that day.
Now, what's really interesting is how this cultural glue was maintained and spread. It happened through two highly contrasting vehicles, the ulama and the Sufi orders. On one side, you have the ulama. These were strict, textual legal scholars. They staffed the madrasas, the Islamic schools, and they served as judges. They're the ones maintaining that very strict Sharia framework we just talked about. But on the flip side, we have the Sufi orders. Sufism was a mystical, highly personal, and devotional path to God. Sufis were these incredibly adaptable missionaries. Instead of imposing a rigid external legal code, they actually engaged with local spiritual traditions, creating a really popular, syncretic version of Islam. And the kicker? Both of these groups operated completely independently of any particular royal dynasty.
Historians actually have a fancy term for this: Islamic institutional coherence. Basically, it relied on a few very real, tangible pillars holding the world together. You had Arabic serving as a shared lingua franca for both scholarship and commerce. You had the ulama and the madrasa networks, providing a standardized education. You had the Hajj pilgrimage, physically bringing Muslims from across the globe into direct contact in Mecca. And of course, you had the Sufi brotherhoods peacefully spreading the faith into new places like sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia. These shared institutions, not some single military empire, were the real glue of the Islamic world.
Let's look at a real-world example in Part 4, the Delhi Sultanate.
To really see this cultural glue in action, we've got to look at the Delhi Sultanate in northern India. This was the most dramatic expansion of Islamic political power between 1200 and 1450. It all started with Turkic plunder raids in the 11th century, but by 1192, after the Second Battle of Turin, they established a permanent presence. Fast forward a bit to 1206, and the Sultanate government was fully consolidated. It would actually endure under a variety of different dynasties all the way until the Mughal conquest in 1526.
Now, the Delhi Sultanate is a super fascinating case study because it shows us exactly how Islamic rulers governed a massive majority non-Muslim population. The sultans generally classified the Hindu majority as dhimmis, which means protected peoples. This was a legal status that permitted them to practice their religion, usually in exchange for paying a poll tax known as the jizya. But the reality on the ground was far more nuanced than just simple conquest and taxation. Hindus were actually heavily integrated into staffing the Sultanate's bureaucracy, showing some serious, necessary pragmatism in how they governed.
And the ripple effects of this encounter were just profound. Because Hindu merchants continued to dominate internal trade and Hindus staffed that bureaucracy, this incredibly vibrant cultural blend emerged. We see highly syncretic Indo-Islamic art and architecture, like the famous Qutb Minar, which beautifully combined Persian Islamic decoration with Indian stonework techniques. Plus, the Delhi Sultanate played a totally critical defensive role. Between 1296 and 1316, Delhi actually successfully repelled the Mongol invasions. Think about the irony there for a second. While the Mongols were busy completely destroying Baghdad and the old caliphate in the Middle East, the Delhi Sultanate held the line. They preserved these essential Islamic institutions in South Asia while they were literally being devastated everywhere else.
Speaking of the preservation and blending of cultures, let's take a look at one final, incredibly powerful symbol from our source material: the Hagia Sophia in modern Istanbul. It was originally built as a Byzantine Christian cathedral way back in 537 CE, but it was converted into a mosque after the Ottoman conquest in 1453 CE. Its contested, deeply layered architecture is basically the perfect physical embodiment of the intense cross-cultural encounters, the constantly shifting political powers, and the enduring cultural legacies of this entire period from 1200 to 1450.
The story of Dar al-Islam is just an absolute masterclass in how culture, law, language, and trade can unify people, even when politicians and borders completely fall apart. So I want to leave you with a provocative thought to chew on long after we finish today. Look around at our modern world. How do shared institutions, whether we're talking about digital networks, international laws, or global commerce, transcend political borders in our world today? Are we basically building our own cultural glue? Thanks so much for exploring this amazing period of history with me, and I'll catch you on the next explainer.